I'll make a motion to approve the
I
tonight's
have
agenda.
a motion by Mr. Collins and a second. A second by Mrs. Harvey. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Collins. Board Member Harvey.
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay. Uh-oh. Do you want me to continue?
Yes,
Board
go
Member
ahead and continue.
Arakawa,
Aye.
Board Member Ross.
Aye, that's a 4-0 vote. The motion is carried. The agenda is adopted. If you'd all join with me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, I'd like to ask Superintendent Frederickson if there are any written communications.
Not at this time.
Okay. At this time, we'll open it up for public participation. Is there any public participation not related to an agenda item?
Yes, I have one that was submitted, and this was
Okay.
submitted on September 18th.
Okay.
And because our last board meeting, we didn't have an open session for that, we informed them we'd read it on the 6th.
Okay.
It says, Dear Superintendent Frederickson and School Board, we are writing in response to your letter dated 16th of September 2020. We are parents with 2 children within the Sylvan School District. While we understand that some teachers, staff, students, and parents are more than ready to return to in-person or traditional instruction, we view opening schools at this time as risky to our children and safe for the families they return to. Our hope is if there is a return to in-person instruction, a compromise of continuing distance learning will be made for families with reservations such as ours. And they listed 7 points. Our county only very recently dropped to a level which allows for a waiver to be sought. Online instruction, while not going well for some, is actually going well for others. There has been so much time, money, and resources put into a really good online learning system that it seems short-sighted to rush back into a situation that could have devastating consequences. Putting children back into school to potentially take them out when there is a surge only intensifies a feeling of instability. We are almost to the holiday season where families will undoubtedly gather, and as a consequence, the community will most likely see an uptick of COVID-19 infection. Some households have vulnerable members, which could be problematic when reopening too quickly. We are coming upon influenza season, with COVID-19 continuing as a real threat to our health. These are concerns we have discussed as a family and within our local community. Our ask is to continue distance learning as an option for those not yet willing or able to take the risk of in-person instruction. Sincerely, the Smith family.
Thank you. And no further communications from the public?
No.
All right. At this time, we'd like to thank those who sent in their comments. We're moving to item 9.0, information and discussion, the superintendent's update.
Yeah, for this evening, since we have probably a very lengthy topic coming up, I'll reserve most of my conversation for that time. So no update.
Very good. All right, item B is the COVID-19 one-time funds update. The attachment is on the public agenda. Is there anything you wanted to add to it, Mrs. Aguilar?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Raw. I'd just like to point out
This was also shared with the board in a previous Friday update, but I'd like to point out that at the very bottom of this summary, I have broken down the $5,020,000, which was previously all slated with a deadline of expenditures for December 30th. And with recent changes passed and signed by the governor, we now have allowance to break that into two different pots, of which $4,398,000 is to be spent by December 30th and $621,751. We have an additional 6 months through the end of the school year to spend by June 30th of 2021.
Great, thank you for that update. We'll move on to item C, our annual interdistrict attendance request reports. If you want to talk about both C and D at the same time, and who's going to be, Carrie, are you doing this one?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good. Go for it, Carrie.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start with interdistrict transfers. And of course, this is just an annual report. So for this school year, we had 413 Sylvan Union School District students who went to other districts. And then we had 97 new students that were from other districts that we accepted into our district. We had 65 students that were denied to leave Sylvan Union School District, and then we had 20 that were denied by other school districts. They did not allow them to come in. Okay, we'll go ahead on to intras. So intra-district transfers, so these of course are the ones that are within our school district but switching to different schools within our school district. We had 15 students that are on an intra-district transfer to attend CF Brown. 10 of those are overflow students. We have 8 students that are now at Freedom on the intra, 11 at Sherwood. We have 45 students attending Savage on an intra. Somerset, we have 7 students. Stockard Coffee, we have 4 students. We have 22 at Orchard on the intra-district. 5 of those are overflow. We have 10 at Standiford. 5 of those are overflow. We have 0 at Sylvan. There's actually no room at the end at Sylvan to do some intra-district transfers over there. USTAC, we had 29 students who were on an inter-district transfer. Woodrow had 8. 7 of those are overflows. Crossroads had 3. And then Marianne Sanders had 22 on the intra-district transfer. 11 of those are also overflows.
Thank you. So I'm looking for hands from board members if you have any questions or comments on the interdistrict transfers. I see none. Okay. Thank you, Carrie, for your report on that. And we're moving on to item E, which is safety and facilities update. Lizette, any comments or questions about this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Raw. Just a brief update to the board on the USTAC modernization project. We had the last meeting for that last week, and we are still in the final stages of finishing up some remaining work with some delays, primarily around the speed line and the exterior parts of that. We had the board do a walkthrough on Thursday, and that went well. We had a list of items that we're following through with. And so we'll be working on that and providing additional information on that to the board. And also we're working on getting information regarding the lockers. I know there was a concern that was brought forth to the board, and we're in the process of looking at solutions and options for that, and providing what those would look like, along with the pricing, and providing that information to the board to just have a discussion and possibly a action item for a future board item, for a future board agenda.
Any questions by fellow board members? It would show of hands. I don't see any. Thank you, Lizette, for that. And we look forward to those reports. Thank you for the nice visit. Campus is beautiful, and we're looking forward and to have that bright, shiny thing on it when it's all done, and we'll rest for a season on construction projects.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of probably looking forward to that a little bit. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm trying to see my screen here a little bit better here. Okay, very good. We are on to our first action item, which is action item A, is the approval of the reopening plan for in-person learning. So in preparation for this, I'm just going to kind of lay out, because this is probably one of the big items that we're meeting on tonight. I thought I would share with you the process in that we're going to go through to go through this particular item. So first of all, we're going to start off with our superintendent, who is going to make a presentation. Then I'm going to go to each board member that they can either ask a question, make a statement, or why they feel they're going to vote a certain way. We will go in the following order: Mr. Collins, Mrs. Harvey, then Mrs. Miyakawa, then Mrs. Lindsay, and then Mr. Raw will be last. Then we will vote on two separate motions. There will be two distinct and separate votes tonight on this item. For all the families who are watching out there and so forth, distance learning will continue in the Sylvan School District. If we open schools or we don't open schools, distance learning will always be an option for you. I know that I received many comments over the time, and we're wondering if that was going to go away. We're not voting on distance learning tonight. That will continue through the end of this school year at least. So know that whatever happens, you'll have that choice for your family. The two motions that we will be voting on tonight is, the first motion will be if the county and the state government approve our waiver, which is, as of this moment, we do not have an approved document yet. If that approval comes back, and if we are still in the color purple in Stanislaus County, do we open the schools? That will be the first motion. We will then vote on that, and the outcome will be announced, obviously, here online. The second motion will be, should and when the county go to red, which is the option where schools can open in red color, do we open the Sylvan School District, even though the county and the city, or excuse me, and the state of California says you can open schools? We said that we as a board would vote on whether we would open two. So we'll have two motions. One is, do we open purple with a waiver? The second will be, do we open if and when we turn red? So those will be the two motions that we'll vote on, and then we will then move on to action item B. So we'll start off with Mr. Frederickson, who will make his presentations, and then we will go to board members. Mr. Frederickson.
Thank you, Mr. Raw. I think that I will hopefully through my presentation give further clarification regarding that. And each time I start, I try to start with a little bit of history, because we have over 200 participants with us this evening. And again, a lot of these discussions about the waiver, small group, cohort actions, and then the different levels of risk that the governor established, those get very confusing. And so hopefully I can provide clarification for the board and for those watching. On my first slide, kind of takes us back in time, or timeline, if I can get that, there it goes. Going back to March of last year. And again, we just, it seems, trying to keep track of this, this time we've been spending with COVID is very challenging. But we go back to March, and that's when our governor declared a state of emergency as a result of COVID-19. And then on March 18th, in our district, all of our schools closed, and we went to our distance learning model. So we were no longer doing in-person learning in March. And then over the spring and the summer, staff, they've worked on reopening plans. for the fall. That's where our energy was directed. At that stage, this county, the COVID numbers were low, and all anticipation at that time was to bring students back where, you know, social distancing as feasible. That was more the plan at that point. Then in July, the numbers begin to increase. And based upon the governor's announcement and the local public health, due to our community spread here in Stanislaus County, schools were closed to in-person learning, and there was a rigorous distance learning requirement at that point. Guidance was given regarding what the expectations were for that, which was very different than what was in the spring. There was no guidance in the spring when we closed schools. So at that point, we shifted gears and we created our Sylvan Select distance learning model, and we've implemented that at this point. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've been in distance learning, and then the governor provided options for districts that resided in a county in the purple tier risk level. What the governor offered was the TK waiver for in-person learning. And again, the intent of the governor at this point was to give local control for local school boards to look at their own individual circumstances in their district and complete a waiver process. And it involved a lot of consultation. It included all of the safety guidelines and protocols outlined in the waiver. So that's what our district has been working on for the last month. We also included in that our work on our local continuity plan. So we did a tandem approach where there was a lot of stakeholder engagement for the local continuity plan, surveys, and stakeholder meetings. We tied that in with our waiver process. And we submitted that on the 30th. Also, during that timeline, the California Department of Public Health provided some additional guidance. So this is where I'm trying to show the different lanes that we've been involved in. So we had the waiver option. We started working on that. Then a new lane opened up. And that was in response to concerns that there were certain specific groups of students who were not thriving on distance learning. And this is a whole different model, a whole different guidance. And I refer to it as small group cohort in-person instruction. So again, we began working on that, looking at what groups we wanted to bring back. And again, that's when people were asking about cohorts. There's some confusion out there. Everybody said, what's the definition of a cohort? Well, if you're looking at the small group cohort, it's a group of 16 individuals. And that's a mixture of adults and children. That cohort is specific to small group cohorts only. It doesn't relate to the waiver or to the guidance that's part of being in the red tier. So working chronologically here, Sylvan, we filed our TK6 waiver on September 30th, and that status is still pending. Those take about 2 to 3 weeks for approval. That's from what we've been looking at other programs in our area. Again, I had just talked about our small group cohort in-person learning. We developed a plan with that, and we actually have began the implementation of that. On October 1st, we opened up 3 classes for our special education students. And that has been going very well. It's taken a great deal of coordination, again, using all of the same safety protocols that are outlined in the waiver, following advice and guidance from local and state public health agencies. And so then we get to our next phase, and this is where we are right now. We've filed the waiver, we've started our small group cohort, and now we're at the stage where we need to talk about what is our reopening plan. And that, I'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, what you have in front of you, this is the latest as of today. And again, this is the new tier model that the governor launched. And it's specific for schools, but also businesses, and provides an outline. And the formula gets complicated. So what I just want to point out here is this is what was currently posted. We are currently in purple, and there's the criteria that's listed there. It's considered widespread, but there's been so much talk over the last several weeks that we were starting to get the numbers that would actually move our county into red. And as of today, the numbers are there, but there's some more. And again, we just received an email today that there still has to be some further clarification. So we're not officially in red at this stage. But according to our numbers, we would be in red, and it wouldn't be until next week. And again, you have to stay consistent in that. So I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds on this. Again, that's the formula. What we need to follow is whatever the rating ends up, where our county is, and there are definitely clear guidelines for what happens when you move from purple to red. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so classroom, school, and district closure guidance once schools open for in-person learning. I wanted to make sure, a lot of people were saying, okay, once you open, what are the rules and guidance for what if we have a case? And this is the guidance that we have. So if the board chooses to reopen, we move forward. If we have a classroom that has a positive case, that classroom and all those associated would be quarantined for 14 days. That class would be closed. If there is more than 5% of the school student population out with COVID-19, the school would be quarantined and closed for 14 days. And if there is more than 25% of the district student population out with COVID-19, the district will quarantine, close for 14 days. So there is clear guidance and expectations. There's contact tracing from the public health. They have already spoken with school sites. They have a software program that will trace and track all cases. And again, a district may choose to open, but once anything like this is reported, we have to follow these guidelines. So there is some clear guidance there. Okay, next page. Okay, as the board considers tonight, and I know Mr. Raw, you gave some direction on the two different motions. And these are the things to consider as we're looking at this. For the TK waiver, this option was given to districts to open to in-person learning when counties were in the purple risk level. Strict process of stakeholder engagement, consult, and a detailed plan. And it requires approval of local public health and California Department of Public Health. The next option that the board consider is if schools move into the risk level, red risk level. And if the county is in the red risk level, schools are permitted to reopen TK through 12. You're still required to follow all of the guidance, the work that we did for our waiver and the work that we put into our reopening plan. All of that, it runs parallel, all the same requirements. The only difference is the waiver was allowing you to open during a purple rating. Okay. In-person learning requires districts to follow state and local public health guidelines. What type of in-person instructional model works best to adhere to the guidelines? So the other thing we need to look at, if we are looking at the opening during the red risk level, is what do we feel at that stage is the best in-person instructional model? And that's outlined in our plan. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, part of my presentation is also just trying to provide a foundation for the board in making this tough decision. This is like you can see by the number of participants, all the input we've been receiving all week, this is a very serious decision to make. But again, we have to, what criteria are we going to use to make this decision? The last slide, there was some criteria. You've got the waiver, you've got the red level. But the other thing is I want to make sure we just go back and visit what is Sylvan's mission, its vision, and its values. I have this posted on my wall in the office. And so I pulled some of the things off of there because, again, we have to have some guiding principles when we make our discussions and our decisions. We provide a dynamic and safe education for our students. And I put in parentheses, we are considered an essential service. And I think it's so important for us, based upon our mission and our vision, is that the students are our purpose. We're here to educate our students. That's our responsibility. Also, the values and things I saw in there. We support our staff in the work of implementing this vision. And we have many avenues to accomplish our goals. And that's actually in our vision and value statement. So, again, as we look at plans, look what we've done with distance learning. Our mission is to educate children. That's our #1 goal and responsibility. And we were using different avenues. And tonight you're looking at a reopening plan. And again, there are additional avenues for us to accomplish that goal. And then the last part, and this was the bottom of the chart, but it was emphasized for importance. We work in the context of a larger community, supporting and being supported by parents and organizations. And we are part of a larger ecosystem. And so, again, as we make this decision tonight, we need to make sure we're looking at the community, our school community that we serve. They're all part of that picture. We need to support them, and they need to support us. But we're here for our students, and I just always have to go back. Any decision we make, is it what's best for our kids and in educating them? Okay, next slide. Okay, so now I'll go into some of the specifics of the reopening plan. Again, it's posted in an attachment. We also sent it out to our staff today so that they could, access that. It's very similar to the waiver with just more specifics. Okay, first page. Okay, I want to go back again, and part of this plan is that small group cohort. And I mentioned to you, we had started our implementation. And these are the groups that we are serving. We started with our moderate and severe special education students and our pre-formal through 2nd grade. And again, at this stage, that's 3 classes. We intend to, and again, we're trying to look at phased in approaches with this. And also that helps us look at how are things working? What other areas do we need to address? And again, this is optional. Families with these students were surveyed and given the opportunity to choose to come to this small cohort or not. They could be on distance learning. Okay, on October 13th, we're looking at our moderate severe special education students, 3rd through 5th grade. October 19th, our autistic students and pre-formal. And then October 26th, autistic students, kindergarten through 5th grade. And again, this did not require a waiver to move forward. This was just additional guidance from what we are already doing. Next page, please. Okay, some of the key things about returning. It's safety. And I know I've talked with our leadership team from the very beginning, is that we need to look at what are our safety protocols. We need to make sure everything we look at focuses on safety as well as our education. And again, there's developed guidance from national, state, and local public health departments with ongoing consultation with public health. So there are clear guidelines that have been provided. Again, each week I participate in a county superintendent's meeting. There's been a representative from public health. She provides us the latest information from them, and we also have the opportunity to ask questions. And a lot of the things that we have placed in our plan have been based upon those documents and based upon those conversations. The guidance provided is based on current research and their current circumstances. As educators, we must rely on guidance from public health departments, as this is not our area of expertise. And this is what's the most challenging when you get into these kind of discussions and decisions, is that there's a lot of opinions out there. Either way, there's a lot of them. So we have to go back to what do our health experts say? And again, I'm not a health expert. I'm an educator. And so my responsibility is to put together a plan based upon what guidance I'm receiving from these agencies. And then the district is exercising options provided by state agencies. So again, the movement we're making, the decision the board will make tonight, this is based upon things that have been provided to us, options provided by our state and our leadership. The TK waiver, that was an option. The tiered regulations for purple, red, orange, and yellow. Those are options that we have to follow. And again, that's part of our decision making. Okay, next. Things to consider when using spaces for recess, lunch. You know, I'm going to move through that because I have that in another slide when I talk about physical distancing. So go ahead and go to the next one. I meant to remove that. Okay, instructional models and schedules. There's many options available, you know, and again, people have been working on these options since March. I've been involved in discussions with numerous school districts, researching hybrid models. There's all kinds of models that you need to look at to be able to meet the safety regulations and the guidance. And that's kind of the playbook is, can I implement this model and meet the requirements and advice and guidance? And again, each option has its own set of pros and cons. I mean, we could sit and debate all night long. Is a hybrid model this way better than maybe the model we're looking at? It's not a criticism of other districts that may have chosen that other model. I've had a lot of dialogue with other districts. Everybody's even doing their own kind of unique hybrid for those that have chosen to do that. Our proposal contains the considerations for the recommended model. The one we're looking at, we got to look at school and classroom capacity to provide for social distancing for these grades levels due to lower class sizes. So in our proposal, we're looking at serving primary students, starting out with our TK, K, and first, and then second and third phasing in. One of the things we looked at in this model was, one, those are smaller class sizes. Would we be able to meet the social distancing requirements? And again, guidance from our local public health. This was just discussed last Friday when we were talking about social distancing. Where feasible, provide 3 to 6 feet of distance. And what happens, a lot of people get ideal model is 6 feet, but local public health said 3 to 6. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Learning loss in foundational academic and social emotional skills is significantly pronounced in these grade levels due to the age and development of the students in these grades. All our students' education is important to us. We understand that. But when we look at the foundational academic and social skills, and we look at that age group, that is such a significant time for those students. And again, that was our reason for moving in that direction. And again, recent data from public health suggests that the transmission rates for this age group are less when compared to the older age groups. So I just wanted to include that as some of the rationale for why we were recommending this model over perhaps bringing older grade levels back or doing a hybrid that included K through 6. Okay, next slide, please. Again, the opening timeline considered what other districts in Stanislaus County and other similar counties are doing. We're looking at the waivers and the change from purple to red. And Sylvan has taken a cautious approach. We're moving forward in consideration of the size of our district and the specifics. And if you've watched in the county, is pretty much, you look at the tiers, not the tiers, the waivers that have been approved. It started out with very, very small school districts. The one outlier was Oakdale, and they had their specifics why they did that. But if you look at as districts are moving forward with doing their reopening plans, a lot of it's based on the size of the district. So I feel like we're right in line with the other schools in our county. Okay, again, safety is very important, and working on protocols, and one of the things that is challenging is making sure that you can enforce and work together to do that. And our administrators and supervisors are diligently working to ensure compliance to the extent possible. There's all different types of compliance and violations of compliance. There's those who honestly make a mistake. They walk out of their office or they forgot to put their mask on, and that happens. Our goal is to work with those individuals. The others, compliance issues can be about revolve around training and people needing further clarification. And there's a lot of that, that people hear different things. So part of our plan includes training, not only for our staff, but also for our students and for our parents. And again, you have some staff and you have some individuals that just choose not to be compliant. And again, everybody's facing that in our society. And I just want, our board to know, our community to know, we are diligently working on that and in wanting to ensure that people are compliant with that. But our second bullet is, as a collective community, everybody plays a part and has a responsibility to help ensure a safe environment for our students and our staff. That means if somebody sees someone that is not compliant, they need to talk to their supervisor. They need to talk to an administrator. They need to inform people. That's how you resolve things like that. But it takes everybody to play their part and be responsible. So we'll be working through that with safety protocols. Okay, next slide. Okay, cohorting. That's part of the plan. And when using spaces for recess, lunch, PE, cohorts will not mix and will maximize the space outside to spread out the cohorts. Again, I go back to my definition of a cohort. The cohort for small group instruction is 16 people. In-class instruction, it may be 20, it may be 23. Whatever that cohort, the key thing about the cohort is that they're not mixing with other cohorts. And our plan addresses that. We have details about recess, about going to the restrooms, to the playground, to lunch. Our plan outlines all of those, arriving to school. All of that is addressed to try to keep students in their cohort. We have itinerant staff will meet the needs of our students individually. They'll meet in small groups of students from the same cohort, no cohort mixing, push into classrooms or teach virtually to reduce cohort mixing. And students will not switch classes or participate in any cohort mixing. Again, that's where it gets challenging with the upper grades. And I think one of the guidance when they gave the K-6 waiver, they didn't include 7th and 8th for various reasons. But one, in the departmentalized program, how do you do that without mixing cohorts? So that's what the cohort section is on. Next slide. Okay, so again, these are all the areas in the plan that are addressed. Again, they were in the waiver. They are a little bit more detail in the plan. I'll show some pictures in a minute that we can take a look at. So we talked about cohorting, physical distancing. We have plans laid out for arrival, dismissal, for breakfast, lunch, and recess, movement around the campus, how it's going to be in the classrooms, the restrooms, other areas on campus, in the office, break rooms, meeting areas, visitors, and in buses. And again, even with buses, one of the things we need to discuss is it's an option to ride the bus, but you have to have one kid per every other seat. So again, we're going to have to work on which students will be able to ride bus because, again, you can't have more than a student per seat skipping a seat. But anyway, all of that's part of the plan. The healthy hygiene measures, face coverings is all outlined in there. It's all based upon guidance from the California Department of Public Health. Same with all of our protective equipment, the cleaning and infection schedules. That's all outlined. We're working with our staff to have regular check and balance to make sure that people have done their cleaning. Again, that's something we have to work with our site principals with and our custodians and maintenance crew to ensure that those are being taken care of. And we will be doing staff training and family education as well. The monitoring, that is, we're working with public health on tracing any students or staff that end up with any kind of positive case. We're working with looking at testing for students and staff. Again, the only requirement with the waiver, and also if we go into red, is that staff are required to be tested every 2 months. Students are not required to be tested. If they're found to be positive, the public health works with them to be tested. But it is not a requirement for students to be tested. And again, the other part of the plan is communication. And again, whatever action is taken tonight, we've already lined up right away to have forums for our staff one day and also forum for our community members. Next slide. Okay, this is just a visual. This is what we started out. We started with what is the smallest classroom that we could find in our district. And we went to that school site, and I believe this is a 2nd grade classroom. And what we ended up doing, we also have purchased 3-sided barriers that fit on the desk. And this is what a room would look like maximized. Again, that is 20 desks, and from head to head, that is 4 feet. And again, the guidance from our local public health has been 3 to 6 feet. We prefer to have 6, but this is, we feel that is our worst case scenario with 4 feet. And this is if every child, if this was a class of 23, and if every child came back, we would we could place further desks up. But again, those students more than likely will be going to distance learning. So that's a class of 20. But again, that is our smallest classroom facility, and we wanted to show an example of that. Okay, next. Okay, here's a close-up shot of what it looks like at a desk. This is a acrylic. Again, it's just there for extra safety, and we have that for every desk in TK through 3. Okay, next picture. Okay, this is an example of a kindergarten room. And so you can see our kindergartners. We are able to put 2 at a table. That space between them is 6 feet. They have barriers in front of them and space between the tables. So that gives you another perspective of what kindergarten would be looking like at some of our sites. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we're looking at a phased-in approach. This is our recommendations for grade levels and for daily schedules. We're recommending that we start, if we're in red or if the waiver is approved, on November 2nd, and all students in general education, special education, and in TK, kindergarten, and first, we return 5 days a week with a normal schedule, following the guidelines that we discussed. Now, again, just so people understand, we have been listening to our stakeholders. If you had observed our waiver, in our waiver, we had our start date as October 26th. And as we've gone deeper into this, looking at all of the things we need to implement, conversations with our employee groups, we did move this timeline back or further ahead to November 2nd. We also are recommending a 2-week gap before we phase in second and third grade. On our waiver, we had a 1-week gap. So again, we're trying to listen to stakeholders. We're trying to be realistic in our plan, but this is our recommendation at this point. That's the grade levels through November 16th. And then as you look at our 4 through 6 and 4 through 8 students, it all depends upon the waiver or red status. There's numerous options we can look at. We can look at doing small cohort learning pods for our 4th through 8th grade students, using the same principles that we did with the small group / cohort guidance that we have. And again, we would try to focus on students that are struggling with accessing distance learning and are having a significant learning loss. And again, this is guidance. That bullet is based upon the guidance that I spoke about earlier regarding small cohorts. We could also look at a hybrid model for grades 4, 5, and 6. You know, current classes divided into 2 groups. A lot of districts, that's kind of what the hybrid model looks like. They look at bringing those students back 2 days a week. They have Wednesday, that is a planning day, and then they have Thursday and Friday. The other groups come again. So we could, based upon if we feel like our phase in for the primary, that we're able to meet safety precautions there and meet all the requirements, we could look at bringing our 4, 5, and 6 back, but not before November 30th. Or I even put an alternative date based upon what the options are. And then the third option, we could do a full day in-person learning 5 days a week for 4th through 8th grade if space is available and to implement social distancing. So I try to put all of the options possible for those grades. But right now we want to look at, first of all, can we safely implement our TK through 3rd grade? Okay, next slide. Okay, if the board approves tonight, if we move forward, we just put this down as our sequence for reopening. We have the presentation tonight. We already have scheduled, based upon the decision tonight, a forum for our district staff. And again, there's a lot of questions, and I didn't go into all the little details here, but staff will have questions, and we'll present that on the 7th. Follow that up with a community forum regarding with our parents and community on October 8th. We're also providing a survey for parents. At that time, we will want families to choose which model they want to do. And basically with the decision making, if a parent chooses to go on distance learning, we are asking and requiring that those students be on distance learning for the trimester, because there's a lot of movement with this. Again, I think one important thing for families to know, if the board approves us to bring back TK through 1st, we will send out forms to parents, getting which feedback from them, which model they choose. Based upon that, we will do our staffing based upon that. So that means a possibility that those children will not have their same teacher. So, I mean, that's a reality of this as we look at that, but it all depends upon how many families choose to do remain on distance learning. And again, we'll talk with our families about that. We'll give you all the details. There's a form all prepared, ready to go. And then based upon the timeline, November 2nd and 16th, we would start our implementation. And again, I already shared the timeline for 4-6. Next slide. Okay. Again, that's my presentation. Hopefully that provided some information, valuable information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fredrickson. We appreciate the time you spent. And at this time, we are going to give time for each of the board members to either ask a clarifying question or state why they're going in one direction or another, just remind that we will be voting on two separate and distinct motions tonight. One is, while the county is in purple, if the waiver gets approved by Stanislaus County and the state of California, do you want to open classroom instruction to the students? The second motion will be, once we move to the color red in Stanislaus County, which allows for instruction kindergarten through 12th, will you agree to put students back into, excuse me, back into classroom instruction? And for the parents at home who are watching, always remember you have a choice. You would get to choose whether or not your children stayed home for Sylvan Select's online program or in residence instruction. So I'm turning the dais over to Mr. Collins first, followed by Mrs. Harvey, then Mrs. Miyakawa, then Mrs. Lindsay, and then Mr. Raw to end up. Mr. Collins, the time is yours.
Thank you. First question, whoever's sharing their screen, are you going to continue sharing the screen? Is there another portion of the presentation? Or?
I was just looking at Erin. She is working and trying to remove that. So right now we're stuck in this mode. So
no worries.
We can't see each other's faces. Yes.
That's all right.
Working on
well, in my case, that's probably okay for all of you. You don't have to stare at my face while I ask my questions. So I guess, Mr. Raw, I have two questions, and then one, then I'll have a statement to make. One, Mr. Fredrickson, in your very thorough presentation, I want to let you know I appreciate that very much. I appreciate how it responded to many of the questions that we received recently. One of the options you presented as a possibility for fourth grade and up was a hybrid model. There's not a hybrid model being considered for TK through third at this time. And I wondered if you could just, you or whoever you'd like to designate, if you want to just talk briefly about that, why that's not under consideration at this time.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Again, I think both of those models have pros and cons. One of the things that we have seen with our families and that people are struggling with it during this time is having consistency. You know, besides the other things I mentioned about wanting to serve those students 5 days a week, the other thing is, oh good, we're back. We got our faces back here. I've talked with people that have been doing the hybrid model. You have a student that shows up one day, they're there a half a day, then maybe the next group comes in. Then you have Wednesday off where they're not there. Then that child was there on Monday, may come back on Thursday. And then you have another group come in on Friday. I just see working with those children that's not a real consistent model. I don't prefer that for our students. I also look at our families. You know, how are these families going to come up with a schedule where, how does that really assist them in getting their life back in line, being able to work? It's really not much different than really kind of where we are right now, except they may get a day or two where they're not at home doing teaching. But the other three, they're at home with their children, trying to provide distance learning. And I have family members that are going through that right now, and friends. And I see the challenges they're facing with their young kindergartners. You know, if you have a kindergartner at home and a second grader, trying to teach them on distance learning. And then if they had a solution of, okay, now I can put them on a hybrid model, that's some relief, but it's really not helping them get themselves into a schedule. So that's why I find my recommendation leaning toward that. I'm not criticizing the hybrid model. I think it can be beneficial. But I feel getting these primary students back into a 5-day-a-week routine, supporting those parents, I feel that's important.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Ra, when you started, you mentioned that we were going to vote on two separate things tonight. One, whether or not to reopen with our waiver. And the second one, if the county moves to the red zone, whether or not to open for the rest of the students that wouldn't necessarily be included with the waiver. I will say that I was not prepared to vote on that aspect of it tonight. I don't think I've seen any or heard about any information regarding what middle school.
That's not the motion, Mr. Collins.
Okay.
The motion is, the first one is purple. If the waiver gets approved, will we go with our plan? Or if it turned to red, will we go with our plan? So the plan is the same for both options.
Okay. All right. I misunderstood that then. Then I thought that we were advancing in a whole different direction than I expected. So, all right. Thank you for that clarification. So for myself, I'm sure like all of my fellow board members and many of the district office staff, we received many emails over the past couple of weeks regarding this issue. And they all expressed very true, very genuine feelings, and all expressed very valid points, even when those points would appear to be in conflict with one another. They're all valid. Emails that came from parents, nearly all expressed a desire to reopen. There were a few that wanted to wait, but nearly all of them wanted to reopen. Emails that came from staff members, nearly all wanted to wait. Again, with a few coming from staff members saying, we should reopen. So what that tells me is we have a very distinct difference in perspectives and desires from basically the two largest stakeholders in this district, staff and parents. Everyone's email, everyone's message, I'm certain was very heartfelt. Everyone had science and reason to back up their opinion. And in a lot of ways, everyone is correct. For my part, it is my intention to vote to reopen tonight. So that is my intention of how I'll cast my vote. I do have concerns. I'm concerned that if we open, classrooms aren't going to be able to stay open. Obviously, if a student tests positive, that class will need to quarantine for 14 days. Opening and closing, it seems disruptive and frustrating. But most of the aspects of distance learning are already disruptive and frustrating. It's been a challenge since the beginning. Even with a lot of good points, I would like to say I do appreciate the emails I received where folks pointed out the positives and the great aspects of distance learning. I appreciated those quite a bit. And it is possible that there are a lot of positive benefits that are going on with distance learning at the same time that it's probably not in the best interest of students if we're able to reopen safely. COVID has forced us all to adapt very, very quickly. And really, this is not a matter of if we open up again, but when, if it's in 4 weeks or if it's in 4 months. So when that happens, I expect and I trust that the good people of this district, including the board, that we will continue to listen to and take into account staff feedback, parent feedback, community feedback, and adapt to the situation. There are aspects of distance learning that just nobody could anticipate. And I won't go into examples right now, but and so as those unexpecteds came up, we continued to adapt and to grow and to change. That is the learning process. So I expect that when we return in person, we'll continue that process as well. That we will adapt to meet the changing needs of our education process. As a district, we are never ever going to be able to promise a completely germ-free environment. That just simply doesn't exist. I wish we could. But I know that if we're following public health and safety guidelines, and that everyone truly is doing their part, that we'll be able to do our jobs to the best of our ability for the sake of the kids whom all of us consistently put first. So thank you very much for all the work that's been done on this so far. Yeah, I hope to be, for my limited time here, to support all of our staff and parents in whatever way I can, that we can continue to support our kids as safely as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. Harvey, you're up.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is, our initial take, what's the percentage of parents have decided to have voiced their, that they would like to have their kids come back? Do we know that from our initial stakeholder meetings? Just off the top of your head?
There's one.
About 1/3.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I can answer this.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So over the summer, as we were preparing to reopen, yes, and so I think that's what you're referring to. That would have been the most recent data collection. So yeah, we had about 30% of our parents who responded, and it was the majority of responses in the district. I mean, not every single family responded, but our data indicated that about 70% were choosing to return their kids to school, and at that time, 30% were choosing to make the decision to proceed in the 2021 school year with distance learning.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you for presenting this information and doing all this research. And then, you know, as a science teacher, obviously I'm always looking at the science, but at the bottom, we are not medical profession. So we are educators, and we are working in an education community. So we have to rely on the expertise and the guidance from the state and the federal level and local level. So I appreciate the fact that, you know, all these things have been put into place that are going to follow these experts that do dedicate their life to making sure this kind of information gets out. I believe that I received a lot of emails as well and communication, and I really want to thank everybody who sent them, just like Mr. Collins said, very heartfelt, very real, very compassionate, passionate emails. That was really neat to have that. I mean, community input is so important. Parents overwhelmingly wanted to come in or have the choice. It was like 50-50 on the number of emails. Staff had two types of questions. One kind of more like the nuts and bolts, and the other one was more of a bigger concern. How am I going to be able to serve these students? And all these are so valid. For me, our number one priority is children and their social emotional, and they're missing out. And I think based on this information that I too will be voting to open up the school under the waiver. And I think the reason why under the waiver is it gives a specific date. We know what to plan for. It gives teachers a specific date. It gives families a specific time. So everyone has a specific date. It says, okay, this is where we're going. This is what's going to happen. And here are your choices based on what we know right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Our next board member will be Mrs. Miyakawa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raw. I too want to thank all those who took the time to write into the board and share feelings, and like the other two, I 100% empathize and agree with each and every one of you and your concerns. It goes without saying, but I do want to say it again in case there's any doubt, that there is nobody in our community, parents, staff, kids, that don't want don't want our kids to go back. Everyone wants our kids to go back. And I hope that we're careful, however this, vote lands, that we don't become divided as a community as a result of this, that we pull together, because we're all worried about these kids. So I just plead with us that we have patience in the process, because we're all being asked to do exceptionally hard things. I spoke with Mr. Raw about an hour before this meeting, because I was considering asking that we table this motion for the simple fact that this is the most critical decision that I've been asked to make in my 9 years on the board. And I'd venture to guess that it is that for the other board members as well in their tenures. But it's also one that I felt the least prepared to make about a week ago. I'm partly to blame for that, and I'll own up to that. I don't think I asked enough questions. I don't know that I asked the right questions, but in my defense, I don't think I even knew what to ask at that early juncture, having never gone through something like this. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago when Mr. Raw put that burden squarely on our shoulders, where he said it's the responsibility of the board to make the final decision as to whether or not we would reopen our schools, that I felt the weight of that. So in preparations for this evening's meetings, I have spent countless, I also haven't gotten a lot of sleep, so that could be part of it.
No, we understand, Ms. Miyakawa. You and I are criers. It's okay.
It's true. I have spent countless hours poring over data, news reports, testimonies of those who have witnessed firsthand the successes and or failures of schools in countries across the world, states across the United States, and cities within California. I've spoken personally over telephone or via email with teachers and friends as far as South Korea and Germany, as well as here in Utah, Oregon, and California, all at various stages and approaches to educating our kids through a global pandemic. And I want to assure you that nobody has this figured out. In my research, I didn't even read most reports dated prior to July, because what we have learned about this virus has evolved and changed so much in such a short amount of time, so that what we knew in May is almost completely irrelevant to what we know now. And we're learning more and more every day, including some very recent studies coming out of India, who have done some massive contact tracing, and we're learning more. But it's been a process of trial and error for governments and civic leaders trying to make the best decisions that they could with the information that they had at the time. There's some schools in Europe and Asia who have been working with, have months worth of experience dealing with COVID in their classroom and lunchrooms, as their school year is different from ours. And I think it behooves us to pay attention to what they've learned, some of them the hard way. The question I see tonight, similar to how Mr. Raw has staged it, is kind of a two-part thing. The first part is it safe to reopen at this time in our area, which is why we applied for the waiver. And when we do decide to open, what is our reopening plan? How will we do it to the safest extent possible with the least amount of risk? And that was the reopening plan presented by our superintendent. So to answer the first question, is it safe to reopen our schools gradually at this point in our time? And I don't know, I don't know if it's necessary. I had asked Erin if she would throw up a video, or a picture. I don't know that we necessarily need it, because Mr. Frederickson put it up earlier, but there's a matrix that we're going with. It was that picture of, oh, she's got it. There we go. Yep, that one, the state one. So this is a matrix that shows, that Mr. Frederickson showed earlier, that shows where we're all at in the state of California. And as of today at noon, the colors changed slightly, as we heard earlier. What's very encouraging for our state is that we're heading in a downward trend, except for a few hot spots. What's frustrating for me is that we have not moved. If you'll notice, Stanislaus County, I don't know if you pointed it out, but it's that purple one, right? And even that one, yeah, that's it. And the one right below us, I think, even changed today. This was put together yesterday, and like I said, the numbers changed. But Stanislaus County just is stubbornly stuck in purple, which has been super frustrating to me. I threw up some counties nearby just as comparison. We have Tuolumne County, which is in orange, which is 2 tiers below us. We have San Joaquin County, which we've got a lot of feedback on. Why are kids in Ripon going back? Because they've been in red for a few weeks. We have, the most surprising to me was San Francisco County, that is in orange, and has had quite low numbers considering their size and their nature of the urban neighborhood there. This was a little instructive to me as to where we are and why we're not moving. So we're still in tier 1. However, I have to add that after today, with all projections, we should move down to red by next week, because the rule is, from how I understand it, that you have to be in a tier color for a certain amount of weeks. It's either 2 or 3 that you have to be in that tier before you can move, to show that stability, that you're not just yo-yoing back and forth. Mr. Frederickson went into briefly why we have the waiver in the first place. I had a lot of people asking me, and even I didn't know initially. It's my opinion, and from what I read, that the waiver really was put in place for more local control. That you have a county like Stanislaus County that has all these cities built into it, and not all of us are experiencing the same level of transmission of COVID-19. Oakdale would be a good example, that their numbers have been steadily quite low. They're a little more isolated than from the rest of us, perhaps, or perhaps they were just very conscientious, or whatever the reason, their numbers are very low. So they should not be judged by the rest of where the rest of us are in the county, because their count, if they were measured on their own accord, would be lower. It would be a lower tier. There's also smaller communities that have the ability to be a little more nimble and adapt to the protocols that are required of us, that should also be judged on their own merit. So that, for me, is why the waiver is put into place, and not just so that we can all have a get out of jail free card per se. So if we look at the states matrix and where we're at, like I said, we're still at the widespread purple tier, with the hopes of moving down next week. But we've been stuck right at that cusp for 3 weeks now. And one of the things that evidence seems to support, the data seems to support, is that schools cannot be open safely for in-person instruction if the virus is not contained in the local community. This is logical. If we don't have it contained in our community to bring kids back into enclosed spaces, you're going to have an increased count. Those communities like Finland, Denmark, Norway, and South Korea that had the virus under control had successful reopenings. But they also had communities that had the strong prevention protocols in place, and people were following them. So for me tonight, I will be voting no on reopening at this time for these reasons. First, the level of transmission in our community is still too high, making for me what constitutes an unacceptable risk for staff and families. However, and although the state of California is trending down, we are at 2.7% positivity rate, which means out of those tested, only 2.7% come back positive, which is really, really, really great, especially considering some of our neighboring states. Oregon's at 6, Nevada's at 3.6, Utah's at 20 something. So California is one of the lowest out of the 50 states, only beat by some of the eastern states like New York. So we are on a downward trend, which is really great. Like I mentioned earlier, Stanislaus has been stuck in purple, and that's concerning to me. If you would throw that back up, was that the original one or was that the second one, Erin? I wanted to also just mention that, from what we had learned from Europe, most of the countries that reopened during the summer, as you'll see here, had rates that were less than 2% positivity rates. Like I mentioned, California's at 2.7, Stanislaus County just got downgraded to 3.5. So we're right there close, but most of the countries in Europe were less than 2%. So a lot of them, the darker blue is actually less than 1%. So their rates were really low. On the flip side, something a little closer to home, New York City had averaged 1.5% positivity rate all summer long until last week when they reopened their schools, and had a jump in 9 different zip codes and have had to reclose within 1 week hundreds of schools. So I want just that as a frame of reference for the fact that we really need to have numbers quite low in order to compensate for the little bit of a bounce that we're going to receive when kids go back to school. And there's nothing more heartbreaking for those teachers and students who got to go back for 1 week and then had to be sent home. And that's not just 1 or 2 classrooms. And granted, we're talking about New York, but they did have a much lower positivity rate than we currently have. Finally, the reason I'll be voting no tonight for opening during purple under the waiver is that the level of confidence that goes into making for a successful reopening is just not there. We need our teachers and our families to not just want to go back and not just need to go back, but have the confidence to go back, that everything will be okay. And that starts with coming together as a community. And we're still kind of divided on some of these preventative strategies. And I think we need to build a little more understanding within our community as to our successes and failures. But I want you to know that after a week's worth of diving deep in the data, I'm much more optimistic about where we are and where we're headed. That optimism has been hard won. I've had to do a lot of studying, and as I've seen the data and I've seen what's going on in the country around us and the direction we're mostly going, it's filled me with a lot of hope. The other thing that has filled me with hope is reading about families. A simple little article I read about what's going on in South Korea, and they've been distance learning for months longer than we have. And just reading about parents who share the same exact frustrations that we have. For some reason, that strengthened me somehow to know that we're not in this alone. So my recommendation at this point, from my perspective, is that we become, I asked both Mr. Frederickson about this, as well as the county public health office, which I called today, if there is any sort of Stanislaus County COVID task force, specifically made up of health leaders, education leaders, board members who are responsible for making this final call, city leaders, ecclesiastical leaders, student leaders, that we're all getting the same message. We're all understanding what is required of us in order to lower the spread and where we're even at on that journey together. So because that's not really possible right now, I would invite all those who are listening, if you're ecclesiastical leaders, if you're business leaders, that you start sharing our successes and where we're at. Do a little digging to find out what our numbers are and where we need to be, because there is a cause for hope. My last comment that I just want to make is that that our numbers are looking really good. And I'll just share really briefly. We went from last week's count was 7.2 cases per 100,000. So an average daily case load of 7.2. We dropped to 4.8, which put us in the red. We went from a positivity rate of 4.7 down to 3.5, which put us solidly in orange. And then a new metric, which Mr. Frederickson might have learned about too, that they just announced today at noon, is they're looking at how we're doing in our most fragile demographic neighborhoods, that what they're calling the healthy places metric, to make sure that we're taking advantage of our disadvantaged and fragile neighborhoods. And we are doing really great in that one too. This is the first week they've measured that, and we're 5.1, which is barely orange. It's like an orangey red. So we're doing really well. The key is we have to maintain that. You have to stay in that color for 3 weeks in order for them to downgrade you. And so that is my challenge that I'm issuing to us. We are in a really good position right now. We're at a downward trend, and by next week, by all intents and purposes, we should be in red. But we have two things that we're going to have to arm ourselves against. Number one, we have flu season that's approaching. The bright side of that is, according to Dr. Galley, the state health official, he said that the Southern Hemisphere, which, as you know, is coming out of their winter flu season, because they're opposite of us, right? They have experienced less cases of flu because of all the COVID preventative measures that we're doing, which is a really good sign for us that we'll also be able to keep flu season under control a little bit better this year. So flu season, we have to be extra vigilant, and we have the holidays coming where we love to mix with friends and family. And if we can be truly vigilant in these next few weeks, then we'll be able to maintain the numbers necessary to keep our numbers down. And so with that, I'll bring this up with Mr. Raw later in terms of a potential information discussion item for our next meeting. But I thank you very much, but my vote tonight will probably be no.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Miyakawa. Mrs. Lindsay.
Well, I appreciate everything that my fellow board members have stated, and also I too want to state to the community that's listening, I truly appreciate all the enlightening emails that you've sent me. A lot of things that I didn't know, a lot of things that that I just needed to be reminded about, and I did want to maybe go into a few more questions than I before I make a statement. I do have some concerns. There was and I sent this out, but 2 days ago there was a email that came out. Excuse me a moment. I have to get back to my agenda here. I lost it. There was an email that came out from CSBA, and basically it states it's very clear about the state guidelines, and they have changed since September the 4th. And on September the 4th, it basically came out with a statement that said that the configuration of that a new guidance states that cohorts must be limited to no more than 14 children or youth and no more than two adults supervising adults, or a configuration of 16 total students without an adult. This really throws me, because I have a problem very seriously about the fact that we're bringing back our kindergarten and TK and first grade. Anyone who's ever taught or been around that age knows it's very difficult to keep them focused more than 20 minutes at a time to begin with. To get them to be in a classroom, in a chair, in their space for that length of time, I see as almost a maddening task. But the thing that concerns me is that they're not required to wear masks. And I understand the reason. You can't keep them on them. So, you know, the statistics have all come back stating that these are the lowest of our children that are getting the COVID virus. But I feel strongly the reason that they are the lowest is because they've been the most protected at home by their parents, their mothers, and keeping the small children away from any kind of exposure they might be involved in. They're not as active. They don't get out and mix with their friends. They don't go out and mix with large groups as much. So I'm concerned about that statistic. I really am, that they are the lowest. I just almost think they might be the most vulnerable. So that really makes me a little leery that they've been so protected, and then to put them in a group setting that large. I don't know how you're going to address the 16. Most of our classes, as you said, were 25 or more. And so I don't know how you're going to get around that. This is actually a directive from the federal government that says it's the California Department of Public Health unveiled updated guidance in providing one-on-one instructions and in small group student groups. So that I don't know how we're going to get, you can get around that. That just boggles my mind. But at any rate, I did have a couple of questions for staff, if they could answer them for me. I wondered if you might, Mr. Frederickson, mention or explain to anyone that might be listening, the one of the greatest concerns of staff is the cleaning of the room. I'm not sure everyone's aware of the equipment that we purchased that is going to be used to sterilize and clean the rooms. And also that we're looking at the equipment to monitor the temperature of the children. I think that would be something that would help the community in a lot of ways, teachers and parents.
Yeah, I'll address that, but also let me respond to that, the guidance you read in CSBA. Again, I don't have that document in front of me. I believe what they were referring to was when the guidance first came out from the California Department of Public Health regarding small cohort groups. Their original guidance was 14-2. And they were talking about that one-on-one and small group. And that's when we started looking at that as how are we going to do this with some of these student groups that need one-on-one aids and more staff? And there was advocacy for the state to change that. So that's when they actually changed that cohort from the 14 to 2 to 16 combination of adults and children. So again, I don't have that document that you're speaking of, but that sounds like the guidance that came regarding small cohort groups. And I talked about that in my presentation. As far as having some of our devices that you asked about, Lizette, would you want to talk about what our maintenance and custodial staff are doing and the devices we're looking at?
Sure. We have the devices that Mrs. Lindsay is talking about, are devices that we purchased to disinfect and sanitize the facilities, including the classrooms, daily each night. And they are electrostatic sprayers that have the disinfectant that sprays it out and basically kind of have this electric charge that wraps around all the different furniture and things like that. And so those would be used and would be in part of a protocol that is being written up and will be reviewed with custodians, and will be part of a training, video training, and also a Google Meet training that will be done with all of the custodians to go over those specific procedures and see how it actually would be done in one of our own very own classrooms. We have a custodian that does an excellent job at recording and doing that, and so they would actually be able to see that from one of their own peers and how it's done in the classroom. And that'll be part of also written out procedures that will be laid out and reviewed with custodians, as well as protocols for daily cleaning of high frequently touched surfaces, and logs to go along with that to document the cleaning of those, as well as cleaning logs for the restrooms that would be documented and be part of documents that are turned into administration to help review the implementation of all of that.
Okay, and those are not currently being used while the teachers are in the classroom by themselves?
We have just received those maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago. So that's why we're in the process of distributing them and writing out the procedures and doing the training.
Okay, and could you talk to me a little bit about the thermometer temperature thing that, I mean, I understand there's a wide range of prices and things. I'm a little leery. I'm wondering if maybe handheld at the door might not be a little more efficient, but if you could explain that.
Sure, we are currently looking at, we have a system that we've evaluated and we'll be testing out before we want to test that out and ensure that it works well within our setting, and particularly the outdoor setting. And once we do that, then we will, if we're comfortable with that and actually seeing that in person and trying it out, then we would be rolling forward with purchasing at least one per site to start out with, to have at the gates to scan in students when they come in, students and staff to scan in when they come in. So that would be a more direct scanning that would be done daily.
Okay, thank you very much, Lizette.
Yeah.
Okay, I wondered if there's any other schools besides Oakdale that are currently, this is from Mr. Frederickson, so you can switch off if you want, Lizette. If there's any schools that are currently in the, planning to open in October like we are there any other, are we the first ones, or are there other schools that are feeder schools that are already planning to open in October?
Well, now in our county, there's schools that there's several of them that their waivers have been approved. Those are all smaller districts. As far as the feeder districts that feed into Modesto City Schools, Stand Union has filed their waiver. I don't know the status of their waiver. They were ahead of us in filing it. We also have.
Do they have their plan, Mr. Frederickson?
Yes,
Do they have it together?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I would say most of the schools have their plans. I know Modesto is working on doing their community input and consulting right now for the waiver. So they're working on theirs. Some schools have made the decision that since if you turn to red, it's the same requirements. Some districts are considering, well, at this stage, do I file a waiver? With the trend going, why don't I wait until red? But again, it's all the same guidelines, same requirements. So I think some of our districts are looking at that strategy.
Okay, well, my understanding, and maybe mine was totally different than other board members, my understanding was one of the reasons we even applied for the waiver is that once you go in to the schools, that you cannot be forced out of the schools as a whole unless the entire school got a virus, but your district cannot be forced to go out if you've gotten the waiver approved. Is that correct?
I got further guidance on that last Friday. I was asking, okay, so if you have a waiver and you're in purple, and then you go into red and then back into purple, if you had a waiver, you stay in school. I said, well, what about red? What if you're in red and you don't have a waiver and you go back and it goes into purple? Guidance I heard from our public health was that at that stage, they would still remain in school. Because they didn't want people yo-yoing back and forth between opening and closing unless the criteria like I shared in my presentation.
So they've changed that in the last month already.
Yeah,
right?
yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I guess my last question for you, Mr. Frederickson, is you and I have had a discussion, very deep discussion about the plexiglass barriers. And I noticed that you mentioned that they had to be facing the front, but our second graders who are at the little round desks are not facing the front. What makes that okay and not being able to have the others face the front?
The one you were looking at, the kidney tables, and those are kindergartners.
Kindergarten.
So, yeah, and so the way the desk is set and the way the teacher is, we did address that. They can pivot their chair and they're looking forward. Okay. And the kidney, that was the rationale with that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Frederickson, for answering my questions. I guess it boils down to, I have a lot of the same concerns that Mrs. Miyakawa has. I'm very concerned about going back in purple because I too have, if anyone's talked to me, wondered why Stanislaus is completely surrounded by districts that are in the orange and even in the moderate, and yet we still are sitting in the purple, and I don't understand it, unless it's just that we have a stubborn streak in Stanislaus. I don't know, but at any rate, I'm very concerned about going back in the purple. I do approve of the waiver. I'm glad we did the waiver, but I do have concerns there. I guess what I would like to see is that instead of us making a jump to approving every group, that we focus on the one group that we're looking at, which is the TK through first grade, and then possibly the next level up. I have a problem with saying that we're approving this and then really not knowing what the results are going to be. I would really like to know what the results are after 2 weeks or 3 weeks of having children in the classroom. And before I make a vote that basically is solid, I guess we could readdress it, but that would just be another thing that would be disturbing to parents. So I do wonder if maybe we should take them one step at a time and address them as the time comes and see what happens. You know, I think it's kind of like, you know, buying a bunch of things and not knowing if the first group is going to fit. If you buy a bunch of clothes, you want to be sure that you try it on before you make sure you ordered a bunch of it. And I think that's where we're headed, is that we're making a decision based on statistics that are based on, one, children that I think are the most vulnerable and the most probably susceptible to getting it because they haven't been exposed to it. And secondly, we're making a decision based on the fact that we have to put all these grades out there right now. And maybe you can explain to me, Mr. Frederickson, why we're doing that, because it doesn't make sense to me to approve something that far out that we don't even know for sure that can happen.
Yeah, again, the purpose, as we outlined in the plan, we are phasing in. So again, as you mentioned, on November 2nd, still that's 3 weeks away, we would be looking at those 3 groups of students starting. Certainly, if we saw complications, if we saw things not working out with the plan, we would certainly come back to the board and share a shift in plans. We're certainly not going to be reckless about this. And again, that's why, you know, I think people can debate back and forth about which groups should be phased in. You know, you could do that. But I think the idea of starting with numbers, even those that are doing hybrid, they're going to have the same number of students on their campus. So if we did a hybrid and we went TK5 and they all came on a hybrid day, you would still have half of your student body on a campus. We're still going to have half of our student body on a campus. It's just that we have them in the primary grades, not divided out. Again, and I talked about that. But for your concern, Mrs. Lindsay, if we get to a point where we see concerns, we're just not going to recklessly keep moving forward ahead. You know, we're going to assess things. We're going to report to the board. We're going to be very transparent about it, and we're going to have challenges. There's going to be challenges with this. Again, this is not a proven science. We're diligent about the preparation we've made, but we will be assessing it and again reporting back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. So I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote because I don't know that that's not exactly kosher to do in a meeting like this. But I do want to address the fact that parents do have a choice. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that this spreads as well for our teachers, and that bothers me a lot. And I'm very concerned for the emotional stability of some of our teachers that may be feeling the force to go back to class when they're not ready. And that tears me apart. As Jen was saying, she's torn apart. That's tearing me apart too. So anyway, thank you. And I think I got all my answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lindsay. And I know that many of you have spent the evening with us and you want us to get on with the business. I just will share a few words to you. I want to thank my fellow board members. I know what you're going through. This is a very difficult decision because I know the hearts of these people and their heart is in the right place and they want the best. I am grateful that each one of them are respectful and kind to one another, even though we may have divergent opinions. I want to thank the staff for all the hard work. I know that they've been basically given an impossible task and have come up with some very good solutions for the problem at hand. I know that you and I are essentially a sum of our relationships and our experiences, and that's who we are and how we need to make our decisions. Many of you know that I was born and raised here, went through Woodrow Elementary and then through Somerset and then on to Davis High School. Left for a few years to do the university and then came back and have a beautiful family and have decided to settle in the Sylvan School District area. And then for the last 23 years, hopefully have been able to give back from all that I took from the Sylvan School District. I'll try not to get too personal because like Mrs. Miyakawa, I am a little bit of an emotional person, but I think you should understand where I'm coming from and why I make the decisions I make. I have 4 children, 2 sons, run nursing homes. They're administrators of nursing homes, and they have been battling this COVID from day one. And I highly respect their diligence. They're on the phone all the time. They're in their facilities and protecting our most vulnerable population. Have they experienced COVID in them? Yes, but thanks to the good blessings of the good Lord, they have not had any deaths in their facilities. I have 2 beautiful daughters that teach school. One teaches 8th grade English in Idaho. One teaches 1st grade in Utah. They have both been teaching in class since the beginning of August when school went back in session. They too have been challenged with this dreadful plague that has plagued this earth this time. I do know that everyone gets on the television and professes to know what's best for everybody else. Everyone claims they know the statistics and so forth. I really, truly don't believe we're ever going to know the truth about COVID for years to come and how it truly spreads and truly infects and what the true statistics and numbers are. It's a challenge. I know that we have these beautiful kids that it's in their best interest to be in schools. And we have an amazing teachers and staff who run our schools that deserve protection too. So it weighs heavy on us on these very difficult decisions. And I too have been like Mrs. Miyakawa, playing an internal battle on which direction to go. Philosophically, I go one way, but my heart pulls in different directions. I will say this to the parents out there of our children. I do believe in the fundamental principle of school choice. You will have the choice to put your children in school or the choice to put your children in distance learning. That choice, as long as I serve on this board, will be my vote. It leaves the choice to parents. As for the teachers, I worry about you. I pray for you. I'm concerned for you. And I know that I will do everything in my power that if you are in a vulnerable population, that you will have every opportunity to get that exemption or waiver so that we can protect you and keep you safe. You know, COVID has hit a lot of people. It's hit my immediate family. It has been a great blessing that we have been able to weather the storm. And so it has hit home. I look forward to the opportunity for our kids to get back in school. And I put great faith and trust in our leadership at the district office, the school side, and to our teachers to provide a safe environment. And if at any time the red flag waves that it is unsafe to be there for any reason, that we will immediately step in and protect them. I look at this as an opportunity to protect in a lot of different ways, to protect your health and to also protect the minds of our kids. So at this time, we'll set forth on laying out 2 motions. I'll present the first motion, ask for a first, a second, and a roll call vote. Then the second motion will be laid out, asking for a first, second, and a roll call vote. So at this time, the first motion to be laid out on the floor is that when the color of Stanislaus County is purple, and if the waiver is approved by Stanislaus County and the state of California, will the Board of Trustees allow the administration and staff to allow students to come back on campus? I'm looking for a motion at this time for that particular motion.
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Lindsay.
I quickly, if we get the waiver, but we do not choose to go back in purple, does that mean we lose the waiver?
Mr. Frederickson, she's wondering if the board votes no under purple to go back, would we lose our waiver, is her question.
I would have to seek some guidance on that. I don't see, as long as we haven't changed our model or the components of the waiver, I wouldn't see that they would revoke that. Again, even the date that we were choosing, it said no sooner than. It didn't get specific. So again, as long as we didn't change the fundamentals of the waiver, I would doubt they would revoke it. But again, I would have to get some advice on that.
Thank you.
All right, so back on the floor is the motion while Stanislaus County is in purple. And we do have an approval from the state of California and our local county for the approval of the waiver. Will the Board of Trustees allow students to return to campus under the direction of administration and staff? I'm looking for a motion.
I will make that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second.
I second.
Second by Miss Harvey. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins?
Aye.
Board Member Harvey?
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay?
No.
Board Member Miyakawa?
No.
Board Member Raw?
Aye. With a 3-2 vote, the motion carries. The item is adopted. The second motion on the table is, should Stanislaus County turn to red, which allows students to return to kindergarten or TK through 12th grade, will the Board of Trustees allow students to return to campus under the direction of administration and staff? Is there a motion?
Mr. Raw, I'm so sorry. I guess since the first one was approved, which one comes first? Is it red? Like,
It depends upon what we're in. If we're in purple, the motion does allow them to come back. But we're also, if we change to red, will we continue? The state of California says you can, but we're voting. And actually, the color we could use the colors red, orange, and yellow. Because currently, we do not allow students on campus.
Isn't it a moot point though? Because we've already agreed.
It is, but it allows the board to voice their, they may change their mind. Some other board members may change their mind. So I do understand your point.
So is there a timeline though? Like which one comes first? Like, let's say we turn red next week, but we voted for purple planned with waiver, and that's on November 1st. And we want to give our people a chance to plan. So
it would be the same. Nothing changes with the plan. It's an exercise. I get your point, Mrs. Harvey, that it's almost a moot point, but it wouldn't have been a moot point if the first motion got knocked down in negative. Then it wouldn't have been. Then we'd say, well, would we come back in red? We know we're coming back in purple under a waiver, but this gives an opportunity for the other board members to say whether or not they agree even under a red situation.
Okay, so it doesn't supersede. So if we turn to red tomorrow,
they're identical. The outcomes.
Okay, so if we turn to red tomorrow, we still follow a timeline. Okay,
everything's identical, no change. So the motion is on the floor. There is a motion on the floor. I'm looking for a motion to approve what I just stated, that if Stanislaus County turns to red, that the Sylvan School District Board of Trustees will allow students to come back to school under the direction of administration and staff in the plan. I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Raw, I would like to amend your motion because it's the only way I'm going to be able to vote yes, and that's that if we go to red, and we have 3 weeks in red with declining numbers, I will vote yes.
Well,
I'll second that motion.
I understand that. I will let you say that you can't, that's the law. And I don't think it's 3 weeks. And I don't want, that's why I didn't want to get into the minutia of how the colors change over time, because the law states of when they go in from red. And so, but I think it could be 2 or 3 weeks. I don't want to work on the law, but I understand what you're saying.
The reason I say that is because my original vote was orange, but because of where we stand right now, where we're a solid red orange, as long as we have declining numbers, because of what I've seen play out in other countries and other states and their percentages, it would be important for me to know that we're going down, especially considering flu season.
Well, the answer to that is I'm not going to have a problem with it because the first motion carried and it doesn't really, is not going to change. But if it helps the two of you in expressing your views, I'm willing to support that as long as Mr. Frederickson doesn't object to that. Because the first motion carried, so the plan is rolling forward. But I do understand the two of your position, and I want to acknowledge the two of you. So as long as Mr. Frederickson doesn't have an issue with it, it's fine with me.
I just want to make sure I can follow the guidance that I receive from public health. And, you know, one of the things I saw in an email today is we may go into red, but we may have to be there for 2 weeks.
Right.
But as far as our planning and trying to get parents lined up and moving with the plan, I want to be careful that it doesn't get, you know, here we turn red and now we got 3 weeks beyond that. And we've already put in motion a November 2nd start date. I just want to be careful that it doesn't look confusing to people about, oh, I thought we were going to start on this date and now you've shifted it again.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think you make a good point, but I'm going to go back to what Ms. Harvey said. It's almost a moot point because the first motion carried and it's going to carry through. The purpose of this motion is to allow the two of you, you know, to say how you feel, what you would feel comfortable with. So I'm flexible with that because the first motion is really going to take precedent. It's going to carry on. I mean, they're going to start using their current timeline. Right. But I think we should be careful, Ms. Miyakawa, that we don't put different rules on purple to red, red to orange, orange to yellow, and backwards than the state of California, because then how are we ever going to track it? I think we should stick with the colors, purple, red, orange, or orange, yellow, and whatever rules those are, live within those rules. Then it'll be easier for us to follow.
Mr. Raw, I'd like to withdraw my second.
Okay.
I don't want to. I mean, if my vote is already moot, I'm not going to play a shell game that looks like that I'm going along with this.
Got it. So I'm looking for a motion on the floor for the current, which is if we turn red in Stanislaus County, we will go back to school under the direction of administration and staff. Is there a motion? No one wants to make the motion?
I'm so sorry, Mr. Raw. I guess I guess it's so confusing, and if we're already voted, can't we just not vote on it? I mean, I don't know.
We could not, and I apologize. We can. I was trying to make it helpful to.
No, I understand that.
But if you find it not helpful, it is completely unnecessary. And so as of for that, if Mr. Frederickson doesn't object, then I will move on to the next item.
Mr. Raw, let me give clarification. Let's think through the scenario. So let's say we turn red in a week and we're waiting for the waiver to be approved. and for some reason the waiver is not approved, we're left in limbo because the board didn't take action to move forward in red, but only action I had is if the waiver was approved, even though we're in red, I wouldn't be able to move forward. So that's where my confusion comes in, with us not having some clarity on that. And
Mr. Frederickson, if the motion was not approved.
I will call on board members to speak. Okay, Mr. Frederickson, continue on.
Yeah, again, so for me to have clarity, again, the board has already approved that if the waiver is approved, that we would open schools based upon our timeline we established. And I don't know why the waiver wouldn't be approved, but if it isn't for some reason, without board action for moving forward in red, we would be stuck because I would not be able to follow the timeline because I didn't have approval to move forward, even though we may be in red, if the waiver is not approved.
Actually, I'm going to clarify that for you, Mr. Frederickson, that you are currently operating off of a resolution. That resolution is one that actually gave you the permission to take kids out of school in compliance with the laws under the state of California. That same resolution would give you the same authority under a red to return schools to full use under that same resolution. So you do actually have the authority and permission. What you didn't have the authority is that under a purple, you needed to have a special waiver that needed to be approved by the board. So we did do that. So technically, under the resolution that you currently have, and as long as the state of California says that you're allowed to do it, there's where your authority lies in. So you would have that authority. Okay. So I will go to two other board members, Mrs. Lindsay and then Mrs. Miyakawa.
Okay. If the state of California does not approve our waiver, there is a reason for it. And we should know what that reason is. We should not return to school in red if we have not received the approval of a waiver. That's our plan. If there's something wrong with that plan, we should not move forward on red. We shouldn't have that waiver in our hand knowing that we have complied with all of the state's requirements. And that would be the reason that you would not vote for red before you would get the purple approval.
Okay, I appreciate your comments on that, Mrs. Lindsay. I understand that, but we wouldn't move forward if we didn't have approval on our waiver under a purple. That was the motion that you had to have an approved waiver. So a disapproved waiver would never carry through. So I appreciate your comments, but it could never move forward without an approved waiver. So Ms. Miyakawa.
So I appreciate the clarification, Mr. Frederickson. That was an important thing to consider, that if under the motion that was made and passed, if we did not get the waiver and for some strange reason we stayed in purple, which according to our numbers should not happen. Our numbers are solid. But if we did not get the waiver approved and we stayed in purple, then we have a problem.
Correct. We do not go back to school. That is correct, Mrs. Miyakawa. Very good.
Mr. Rao.
Do you have a question, Mr. Collins? Yes, go ahead.
Sir. So I appreciate both of those comments. And I think where I am right now is, my understanding is if our waiver is not approved for whatever reason, we will get feedback on the areas that need clarification or sharpening up. At that point, we would make those changes, adjustments, clarifications, and then that waiver would be submitted again. My understanding is that this vote that we just took would still apply to a re-release of a waiver or a refined waiver. So yeah, I'm okay to proceed, and I don't think we need a red zone vote.
I'm in agreement. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Frederickson, before I move on to the next agenda items, that under a red, you do have the authority under the current resolution that's passed?
I don't think so.
Again, I don't think we're going to struggle with the waiver. I think that's going to be a moot point. Again, I was just wanting to have clarification if for some strange reason it didn't happen. I just didn't want to take any action that the board felt was not what you had intended. So that was my main reason for bringing that up. So yeah, I just don't want to ever move forward with the board not feeling that I implemented what you said.
Right. Well, I think you have a 3-2 vote. The majority of the board says to move forward at this time.
Okay. Assuming
you get all your appropriate state and county approvals.
Correct. Yeah.
So we do need to make a motion to pull that from the vote then. We need to table that. Isn't it part of this 2-point vote?
No.
It's not on the agenda as a 2 vote?
No. No.
You just broke it down that way?
It's an action item, and under the Roberts Rules of Orders on action items, motions and seconds can be massaged and created within a board meeting, the actual motion and second. Just as you want to amend a motion and so forth, you have that authority, and you are choosing not to do that, so that's perfectly fine. There's no specific written motion / second. That comes from the floor during a board meeting.
And it died from lack of motion anyway.
It died from a lack of motion. So that happens quite frequently in board meetings.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure we were doing the right thing.
Yes, and again, I want to extend my thank you to my fellow board members in the dignified manner in which we handled a very difficult subject tonight. I am very much appreciative of you. Thank you very much. Item B is the approval of student desk barriers for elementary school from Sandbox Sign Company. I think all of you had a chance to see those in the pictures. Did you need to add anything to that, Lizette?
I have nothing further. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Mrs. Lindsay, did you have a question?
Yes. I alluded to this in my comments earlier, but I'm really concerned about those dividers. They don't seem to shield the body. I would think it almost looks like they'd have to lay their head on the desk to have their heads protected, and that's a little bit of a concern to me. Lizette, were there no things that could come out further around their body? Then, I mean, if they're going to be 3 feet apart in the second grade, and if they both stand up and get up on the same side, they're not 3 feet apart, they're like inches apart. And that kind of concerns me that they're that close to each other, and there's these plexiglasses only stop at not even at the edge of their desk, before the edge of their desk.
We looked at the barriers together in cabinet. We requested a sample of that to be sent to us beforehand. So we received that. We looked at it on a desk, and we looked at the functionality of it. These barriers are additional protection, between the students, aside from the distancing. And the distancing that we measured is from one seat from head to head. So it's the spacing physically between each of the students, not necessarily the edge of the desk, because it's about where the students are in relation to each other. And so if a student is sitting there, it covers, we've actually sat in them and had them here in meetings, and they extend above our heads. And then they provide the additional side protection while allowing some movement of the student on the desk as such, so that they can actually move around and work within a space too, and not be completely confined. So finding a balance between what provides some protection, but also some movement for the students as well.
So if they're sitting though directly in their seat and they're not leaning over to work on their paper, there is no protection around them. Is that correct?
The protection is around the desk and
so
around
the
the
desk
student.
is fairly protected, but the child isn't.
Well, the students are forward facing into the barriers, which is the guidance is the students should be all facing forward in the same direction, not facing each other, so they're not spreading the droplets is referred to the side. They're facing forward, and that's where that barrier is providing the protection.
Okay. Let me add also on the, if you look at the picture and the way we have, when we did the close-up on the desk, we had the divider pushed toward the front. If you look at the curved section, that can come to the edge of the desk, and there's still an overlap that comes back on the shoulders of the child. So, and you can also flex those. They can be moved around. So there is, I think, the way you look at that picture, it looks like they'd have to just totally lean into their desk.
Right.
But if you bring that lower section to the edge of the desk, there is about, it looks like a 4 to 6 inch curve that also provides some, but it doesn't wrap around the back or their full body.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Harvey and a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Miyakawa. Ms. Miyakawa, roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Grudgingly, aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board Member Raw,
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. The item is adopted. Item C is the approval agreement for the Memorandum of Understanding for the Social Worker Intern Program with California State University, Sacramento. This is one of our, did you need to bring up anything about that, Dee Dee, or can we move forward with that?
So actually, I was going to take the item. It's just exactly that. This is a new MOU for Sacramento State. We have social work interns right now from Stanislaus, and we have someone who's went to Sacramento State that's interested as well. And so this is just the MOU, but it's a new MOU.
Right. Very good. All right. Looking for a motion to approve the MOU.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Collins in a second.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Harvey. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board Member Raw,
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. The item is adopted. Item D is the ratification of Chromebook purchase for distance learning. These are those 750 or so Chromebooks that have been in your Friday updates that were ordered from Office Depot because the other ones were on back order. So it's something we've heard about a lot. Did you want to say anything else, Marty, on these, or have we had this item enough presented to us?
Actually, Mr. Raw, it's my item that I'm bringing forward to the board.
Okay, Ms. Granger, I'm sorry.
That's all right. And I don't have anything further to add. I've written quite a bit about it in the Friday update. And so has Marty. We've tag teamed on the write-ups on this one.
Very good. Thank you. Apologize for that, Ms. Granger.
It's fine.
Looking for a motion to approve item D on the action item agenda.
I'll make the motion.
A motion by Ms. Harvey and a second by Mrs. Lindsay. A roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board Member Raw,
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. The item is adopted. Item E is the approval of our expenditure of construction funds. Any questions by fellow board members on this regular agenda item?
I
Oh.
Can I ask one
Yes,
question?
Miss Lindsay, go ahead.
Yes, could we ask for an update on those 2 items that have occurred in the construction at USAC? Could we have an update on that for some of us that were not able to do the walkthrough? Well, you don't have to do it right now. I mean, a Friday update or something.
Yes, right. There are several items. We did a walkthrough. It was quite comprehensive. It lasted for more than an hour. I think 3 board members were able to attend. I did a write-up of about 10 items that I saw on there. I think Ms. Aguilar is going to respond to that to all the board members so they know what questions I asked. And then we still have some final charges coming out because there's some things that still need to be resolved. Their lockers and et cetera and things like that. So if that's what you're referring to, I'm sure that Ms. Aguilar will be presenting that to us shortly in Friday updates.
That is correct, Mr. Raw.
Okay. Are we going to be able to vote on that, or are we going to be?
Yeah.
I mean, okay. There'll be an actual action item on that.
Actually, on the lockers, we're going to bring that item to the board, even if I have to call a special board meeting for that to expedite it, just because it could be a very controversial item. I don't know.
What Mr. Ross is trying to say is there are a combination of issues facing the lockers.
Oh, no.
Yes.
No.
Thank you. You know, what are we going to do without you, Mr. Collins, for those wonderful dad jokes that you keep supplying me with?
You will laugh less, that's for sure.
Right. Looking for a motion to approve item D on the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A motion by Mr. Collins and a second. Second, I believe that was Ms. Harvey. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins?
Aye.
Board Member Harvey?
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay?
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa?
Aye.
Board Member Raw?
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. The item is adopted. Mr. Collins, are there any consent agenda items you either have a question or want to roll or a separate vote for?
No, sir.
All right, Ms. Harvey, any questions or a separate vote on any consent agenda item?
Not this time, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Miyakawa, any questions or a separate vote on any consent agenda?
Not for me. Oh,
okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, very good.
I don't think.
Ms. Lindsay, any questions on items or a separate vote on any of them?
Of course. I have a question.
Please.
My question is.
No, tell me the letter numbers.
I.
Letter I, okay. Any others?
Nope.
Okay, very good.
It's not for a separate vote. It's just a
no,
question.
I am the same way. I just have 3 brief questions, and one of them was with Mrs. Lindsay. The first one is, hopefully a real quick one, is on item E, it's the approval of this, the SARB agreement. I don't really have a question on now that we're going to have potentially in-school students. I can see the need for SARB, but since we were all distance learning and I didn't know how it was going to come, I had marked this to say, will we really have 8 kids for SARB? Do we have to pay the 8 for the 8 even if we only use 5?
Yes, we do.
Oh, darn it. Can we do a smaller number and then pay incrementally up? So, I mean, I just don't know if we're going to have 8 SARBs in a half a school year. I mean,
well, actually, we usually we make this vote or we decide on this early in the year or even late the previous school. And we knew that we were coming into a pandemic and that we were going to be encouraging people to stay home when they're sick. Yeah. And that it probably would be, counterintuitive to then, potentially take people to SARB. But we're finding that our same chronic non-attenders that don't attend in person are also not attending in distance learning.
Got it.
Even having more. So I would be leery to reduce that number.
All right, that's a good answer. Thank you. That satisfies me. Item F, I think this might fit with Ms. Granger. It's your Title IV funds for learning another language. And I guess my question is that it's a $20,000 charge for a class, and yet we're also buying Rosetta Stone. Is Rosetta Stone not sufficient with the distance learning? I mean, it's almost like I feel I'm double paying for something. I understand when we're in residence and the people come to learn the second language in a classroom environment, but if it's going to be distance learning, why is Rosetta Stone not satisfactory to do that, especially since we own a lot of the licenses? Do you follow where I'm going on the question? Do we need to spend $20,000 on something where we're already having Rosetta Stone?
I think I do understand the question. I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Crothers. Both Rosetta Stone and the family literacy on the agenda are her items as she works to support our second language learners and the Yale program.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So these are two totally separate services that we give our students. The Rosetta Stone is for our students. We primarily use this for our newcomers, and they are able to use it distance learning. It's been great, and we're even having more professional development with our ELD specialists. The difference with this is for our families. This is our parent outreach, and so these are parents that will be getting this English learning classes. There are two different types of classes. There is a family engagement, getting them used to the community and how to talk to school with parent-teacher conferences and shopping and so forth. And then there is actually English classes for the parents as well. So they're very different.
Yeah, I understood that part, and I appreciate your comments on that. I just thought that Rosetta Stone might help those parents too. In fact, I've always had a dream of mine to be bilingual like some of my kids. And I was going to try Rosetta Stone because I hear so many good things about it. And I'm a really old person. I thought, is Rosetta Stone not good for old people like me?
The big difference, and I agree, I want to be multilingual as well, and Rosetta Stone has great results. The big difference with this is that it's parents coming together. And as I look at the feedback, they are saying, we want to do more games together. We want to have more collaboration together. So there is that community part of it that the parents really, really appreciate, that is different than the one-on-one learning that you get with Rosetta Stone.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Crothers. Mrs. Lindsay, item I.
Actually, Mr. Raw.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know anybody else wanted that item. So
I do too.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Raise your hand so I know who's talking. I missed it. Okay, so first Mrs. Miyakawa, then Mrs. Lindsay, and then we'll go on to item I. Ms. Miyakawa.
Yes, Dr. Crothers, I just really briefly just want to thank you for bringing this back. I just met with one of my Afghani mom friends, and she's just talked to her about, her progress and just how much she loved this program and how sad she was that, it had stopped for the time. So when I heard that this was coming back through the Friday update, I was thrilled. So on her behalf and on behalf of all the other adults who participated, thank you so much for remembering this group. The two-part component of helping them to adapt to our community and new ways of doing things is every bit as important as learning the language, and feeling like they belong here and making that transition so much more successful for them. And so thank you so much for making this a part of our district and such a successful part.
Thank you. Mrs. Lindsay.
Yes, I spent quite some time discussing this with Mrs. Granger, and I have a huge issue with it because if you read it carefully, there were 30 parents and it cost us $10,000 last year. This year we're looking at 60 to 65 parents for $20,000. And I have a real problem when you're spending over $3,000 a person to present a program like this. There's got to be something that we can do that is not so draining. I mean, I would be thrilled if we could reach 100 parents, maybe 200 parents, but to be only reaching like 60 parents, that seems such an extreme amount of money, especially in the financial situation that we're in right now. So I'm kind of having a little issue with this one, and I really would wonder. I did speak with Mrs. Granger, but I wasn't assured that there was even any other options. Did Mrs. Crothers?
You wanted it as a separate vote, Mrs. Lindsay?
Well, I just wonder if Mrs. Crothers had any other.
Yeah, I agree
on that.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. The more parents that we can get involved in our schools and in our community, the better. So I agree, more is better. The way this shift came about, well, let me start off with, this is our Title III Immigrant Funds. It's a grant that we apply for, and it's very, very challenging to spend these funds. It's very limited on what we can spend them on. And so we have some districts around us actually don't even take it anymore because it's been so challenging and the money goes unused. So in the past, we were with another company or another group, and the services were good, but there was some challenges with that. And so about 3 years ago, we switched to this group, and we've had great success with them. And the difference is, if we were to do something in-house, we would have to have our staff, we'd have to have them trained, we'd have to have the curriculum. They have tech support that they provide, Chromebooks for their families. And what we're doing with the Stanislaus Literacy is they bring all of that. We are doing is we're giving them the facility in the past, and now it will be online for now in the fall. But in the spring, if we can come back in person, then they'll be together. And as you heard from Mrs. Miyakawa and from other parents that we've heard from, they really appreciate that community feel. And so we were with another service in the past, but there was the shift because of the services that Stanislaus Literacy provides. And due to the limited availability of using these funds, we have felt that this has been a great success. The surveys that we got back in the spring show that the families really appreciate it. On a scale of 1 to 5, they're like 4.8 overall, and really involved and engaged. And it really helps our families with their communication, and that's needed more than ever. The shift that we have now is they have this Strive to Thrive class that they're going to be doing in the fall if it passes, and then we will have 3 classes for the ESL. The ESL classes that the families take are also leveled depending on their English level, so they get an assessment at the beginning, and they'll either be leveled a 1, 2, or 3.
And we're
you
limited
want a separate vote, Mrs. Lindsay?
Could I finish my question?
Sure.
Are we limited to the 65 people? Is that what I don't understand how this can be so expensive for such a small number of people. I would love to see us be able to do this. Does it only serve that many people? I guess that's what I'm asking. Can we not get more people involved in it?
This is their ratio that they have. They like to keep the number small so that the community feel and the conversation can flow. With the larger class, you're not able to have those conversations flow as easily. And so that's the number of parents or students that they call them in the classes that they provide. In order to get more parents involved, we would have to then have more funding available for those classes.
Okay, and how many classes do they have?
So what we're offering is the one in fall, and then 3 family classes for ESL in the spring. If we are remote, if we are back in person, then they would do 2 classes and 1 childcare, so that their kids can come on campus and be there as well, so that they have that service provided so they can participate in the class.
Okay, and this money can only be used in this area, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Immigrant.
Do you want to vote, Mrs. Lindsay?
No, I just wanted information.
All right. let's move to item I, which is the yearbook. Did you have a question, Mrs. Lindsay, on the yearbook?
Well, yeah, I just I was questioning, is it a real prudent year to have a yearbook? I mean, I realize every child wants their yearbook. I would think that might be appropriate at the 8th grade level, but I'm not sure that having yearbooks at every level is really something that we need this year. I mean, I don't know. It was just it seemed kind of funny to me that we would be under the situation we are and we're looking at yearbooks.
Okay, did a staff member, I didn't even know we did yearbooks at the elementary schools. I thought they just got a picture with their teacher and all the kids in their class. So I was new. Who handles that? Is what department is that you, Carrie?
I mean, I can answer it. I know that I was speaking with the administrator. So these contracts, it's for more than 1 year. I didn't look closely at this one. Usually they're for more than 1 year. And the other 2 middle schools are still under their yearbook contract. And so if this middle school did not sign a yearbook contract this year, that would mean 2 of our middle schools out of 3 would receive a yearbook, and the 3rd one would not. And that caused a little bit of inequity. In fact, we had some conversations about that. You know, and it may be something that you know, we'll review in the future, but I know that this administrator was just trying to make sure that they were keeping in line with the other 2 middle schools, so there was equity across all 3 middle schools.
And like I said, I see it in the middle school. I just don't see it in the elementary right now.
Carrie, I apologize for interrupting on this, but when I clicked on the item, I thought it said it was an elementary school yearbook.
Yes,
it is.
This particular one.
My
this
mistake.
particular one happens to be for Sherwood.
Okay. My mistake. I guess I assumed, because I know that Jostens was also a yearbook contract that was potentially going to come through for Dan Savage Middle School, and we just had this conversation. So I apologize. I did not open that up.
Do we have yearbooks at elementaries rather?
Yeah, we do actually. A lot of times PTAs will take this on, and the PTA will build the yearbook. They'll pay for the yearbooks, and then they'll sell the yearbooks. And so I would assume then that Sherwood has a PTA that wants to do that. Go ahead, Belma.
I'm sorry.
I can stop.
May I speak? Gretchen just messaged me that they have some virtual spirit days, and last year they added QR codes of teachers sending virtual message, and they've already been collecting photos, and their PTC last year bought yearbooks for everyone.
Okay, so this is not coming out of school site funds. This is just a contract we're approving that's funded through parent teacher organizations or committees or something, not actually taxpayer site funds, correct?
No, the middle school's getting it. We're paying for them.
No.
So I was incorrect. I apologize, Mrs. Lindsay. I thought that this was the Johnson yearbook contract for our middle school. I was incorrect. This is the one actually for Sherwood. And so that is through the PTA.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Granger.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm going to jump in here real quickly just to provide a little additional information. Yes, elementary yearbooks are often sponsored and supported by the PTA, who does the back end construction and either provides those for every student or in some cases provides them as for sale. It appears that in this particular instance that Sherwood's PTA has in the past provided them for students, and so it sounds as if in this particular contract with Jostens, they're taking advantage of some of the virtual options that are available to our schools. In regards to middle school, this is a very timely conversation. I have been and will be continuing to meet this week with our middle school yearbook teachers, because we're talking about the ability to provide a yearbook in the traditional sense. So to your point, Mrs. Lindsay, around is it really a prudent time to be able to engage in what we continue to, or what we think of as a traditional yearbook. And in the middle school, that is a really important question that we are actually asking and entertaining. There are some current contracts in place at the middle school with Jostens, and I know that another school was exploring the possibility of a contract, but in my conversations and working with all 3 middle schools, we're hoping to have some agreements across the district in terms of equity for sure, but we're also looking at the options of whether or not we want to continue with a traditional type yearbook. And I also am in communication and will be meeting with the Jostens rep regarding the contracts that we're currently under and what our options are for that. So I'll have more to update on the middle school landscape with yearbooks in the next week or so after I continue meeting with these folks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda tonight.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Lindsay, and a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board Member Raw.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The consent agenda is adopted and approved. Mr. Frederickson, any final comments under superintendent's report?
No, not at this time.
All right, thank you very much, folks. It's been a long evening. I again compliment you on our respectful, perfect board meeting in the way that everyone was just so appropriate and dignified, and I am so much appreciative. And when I retire here in about a month and turn the mantle over to Ms. Miyakawa, see how easy it is, Ms. Miyakawa? It's so easy. This is a good board. So life is good tonight. Thank you for making my experience positive, and thank you all for your participation. This meeting is officially adjourned until we meet again. Thank you all.
Thank you, George. Thank you, staff.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, George. Thank you, team. Appreciate it.